I'd like to call this meeting of your Newark City Council to order. Autumn, please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Here.
Mr. Bub?
Here.
Mr. Cost?
Here.
Mrs. Floyd? Here. Mr. Guthrie? Miss Hall?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Marmee?
Here.
Mr. Rapp?
Here.
And Mr. Roletta?
Here. We have 9 present this evening. Next on the agenda, we have the invocation by Mr. Johnson. Would you please rise?
Let us pray. Lord, we come as your servants. Bless us in our deliberations. We thank you for the guidance that you give us, and may we know your will. Be with those in want and need and those who mourn. Be with those who've experienced joy and blessings. We thank you that we live in a country of freedom, and may it be expanded to the world. And we pray always for peace in our community and peace in the world. And we pray in your name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Next on the agenda this evening, we have caucus. That's the time for council to discuss anything on the agenda they may like to discuss this evening. Do we have anything? Mrs. Floyd?
I'd like to make a motion to excuse Mr. Guthrie.
Motion by Mrs. Floyd, second by Mr. Marmee. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Mr. Guthrie will be excused. Next, we have the minutes of our council August 17, 2015 meeting. Do we have a motion to accept those? Motion. Motion by Mr. Rapp, second by Mr. Johnson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. That passes. We have 4 reports of standing committees this evening, one from Finance, one from Capital Improvement, one from Service, and one from Ways and Means. Without objections, those will be received and filed. Also under reports from city officials this evening, we have one from our auditor, Stephen Johnson, the operating report for the period ending August 31st, 2015, and 2 from Barb Jobs. One, the income tax revenue reports ending August 15th, and one ending August 31st. Without objection, those will also be received and filed. We have one petition this evening. A petition was received to vacate a portion of an alley running north off of West Main Street between 108 and 112 West Main Street. That will be received and filed. And under communications, we have 5 communications this evening. We have one from Paul Moran, his statement under his comments for the July 20th council meeting. And we have 3, one from Teresa Motes, Ron and Debbie here, and Bill Motes asking council to vote no against the proposed legislation to merge City of Newark dispatchers. Without objection, those will be received and filed. We also have a proclamation tonight. We have Mayor Hall.
Sure, thanks. Denise, you'd like to join me in front? Upcoming weekend on Saturday, we stand up front here, is the wonderful soil and water project conservation to clean up the Licking River as every year, and I think this year you have over 350 volunteers signed up for this great project, and we hope the weather is great. And Shirley, our stormwater control, and John Trios here is very involved in that in many ways. But I think you take out in the numbers of a couple hundred tires and all those big numbers. So I'd like to do a proclamation, and Denise, by the way, is now the program director for Licking County Soil and Water Conservation District. She was in that acting role for some time, and now she's been anointed with the right oil to be permanent, so she's real happy with that. Whereas it is with great pride that we celebrate the 21st Licking County River Roundup on Saturday, September 12th, 2015. We hope to energize our community by holding this hands-on cleanup of our Licking County waterways. Over the years, this extremely effective roundup has gained great momentum. In 2014 alone, over 250 volunteers and local leaders pulled nearly 300 tires and 18 cubic yards of trash and recyclables out of our county waterways and surrounding riverbanks. Licking County townships, cities, universities, businesses, sponsors, and River Roundup Committee pledged to work together with the communities of Licking County to provide assistance in the cleanup, along with this year's premier sponsor, Shackelford's Disposal, which is housed here in Newark, and we're very proud of that. In collaboration with the Licking County River Roundup event, the City of Newark wants to get everyone in this community, from families and organizations to public officials and senior citizens, working together to help keep our water clean. Now, therefore, I, Jeff Hall, Mayor of the great City of Newark, do hereby proclaim Saturday, September 12th, 2015, 2015 as Licking County River Roundup Day in Newark, Ohio, and encourage our citizens to get involved in preserving our natural resources and to be conscientious of the future of our environment. There you go, Chair. Words you'd like to say, you're surely welcome to. If you're still got any energy left in you, because I know you've been busy lately. So.
Yeah, we're very busy with the River Roundup just a few days away. Literally, I was on the registration site before I came here. We officially have 292 community volunteers signed up right now, plus all of our local leaders, committee members. This has been an amazing registration period. We have more registrations at this time before the event than we've had in the past. It's only going to get bigger. Newark gets props. We have 7 sections of waterway in Newark. Most of them are already sold out. We just don't have enough canoes, kayaks, equipment to bring more people. So, bragging rights.
Yeah, very good.
Sure.
We appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you to Jeremy. Thank you to Alex. You guys have been really involved in getting to know what it's all about. Alex had his first paddle on the Licking River a couple weeks ago, and now he knows how amazing it is.
And you stayed upright? You stay upright?
Yes, that too. Yes, but it is a great event, whether you can participate on Saturday or not. Check it out. We care about our water every day of the year, not just on September 12th, and we're glad we have a community that cares also. So thanks to everybody for your support.
And so there's a website you can log in, and you also can show up at Everett Park? Or where would you prefer someone to show
Actually,
up?
I would say look at the web or the online registration to find out where there are still spots to participate. Newark has room on the area around the COTC campus at this point, plus outside Hebron, Union Township, all that. There's other places too. I'll shamelessly leave this with you.
Good. We'll be happy to get that around.
Yes.
I'm going to set it on the table. If anybody wants it, you can surely help yourself do it. Otherwise, we'll get it out for everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Denise. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks for coming in. That's a great event. Looks like we're going to have some good weather, and it's going to be a little cooler, so it should be excellent. Yes. Next on the agenda this evening, we have comments from citizens. There are 2 places for citizens' comments. One is now, and one is after the legislation. This is not a debate with council. This is just your opportunity to be able to say a comment or 2 if you like. Is there anyone who would like to do this first section of citizen comments?
Sorry.
Come on, head on up, Tim.
My question is on Ordinance 1525. It regards Senate Bill 198. I'm sure the law director is probably the one to ask. So this was brought to the Senate by one representative. There are no co-sponsors. It was recently brought forth. If this does not pass in 2016, does Ordinance 1525 not go into effect?
Once again, this is not a question and answer period with law.
Okay, that's my concern, and I don't know if somebody can answer it or not, but that's what my concern is if Senate Bill 198 does not pass, what happens to Ordinance 1525?
Okay, thank you. Tim?
I'm coming.
All right, take your time.
This is Tim Waldron, 167 South 10th Street. I can't remember what it is. 82, number 82, 82, the bike path down along the High Street. Several long time, about 25 years ago, I issued a plan from, I used to be the head maintenance guy from the county parks out there on 37, and they told us that there was always one out there. There is a bike path down, well, it's not a bike path, it's called a sidewalk, all along Ohio Street, from Sept Street to, well, ball field. So why don't you just go down and save taxpayers a lot of money, and go down and get some of those people out of jail like we did, and clean that sidewalk off, and you have your bike path for nothing. But I know I'm beating a dead horse. You guys are going to vote because you guys got the money from the ODOT. But South 7th Street, you're going to put one from High Street to Walnut? There's only 2 bike paths down there. It's called a sidewalk. You got one running north and you got one running south. The plan that we issued way back to Terry Frame, back in, God, I can't remember, before even, Frank Stair, I think it was Frank Stair was mayor, first mayor, we issued a plan to make those sidewalks the bike path. You got the guardrail between the bike path, or the sidewalk, and it to keep the kids from getting in the streets. So think about saving taxpayers some money and just clean the sidewalks off. Okay, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Anyone else for this first section of citizens' comments? Mr. McAlpin. Anyone else in this first section? Okay.
David McElfresh, 153 North 39th Street here in Newark. Speaking tonight as president of IFF Local 109. I rise in opposition to Ordinance 15-22, the part-time fire inspector, life safety inspectors. We strongly believe this is a mandatory subject to bargaining, and to replace bargaining unit members with non-bargaining unit members is an unfair labor practice. To move forward knowing this, I believe, is negligent on the part of this council, as it will cause further expenses and lengthy unfair labor practice. Let this be negotiated, as it should be, in a process that most of you have agreed is the rightful legal process for labor and management to settle their differences in the negotiations process. These have always been full-time bargaining unit positions. The recent records I have of rosters go back to 1984, so over 30 years. We have had anywhere from 1 to 3 full-time firefighters filling those inspector positions. Since the statement's been made that the bargaining unit members don't want these positions. Well, in 2014, we had 3 bargaining unit members in these positions. And since 2012, we had 3 people in these positions. And as I stated earlier, back to 84, we've been anywhere from 1 to 3. Now, back in 14, we had somebody announce their retirement, and he took a while to retire, but he finally retired, and then we put one of those people back on shift. So we actually created the vacancies and then said nobody wants them. And I did some checking. The positions hadn't even been bid out since November of 2014. So for almost 9 months, they hadn't even attempted to bid them out. Now, as of September 1st of just last week, they have been bid out, as they do with all of our unbid positions, because it's not uncommon to have positions that nobody bids in the fire department. They're the less liked positions, we'll say. So these 40-hour positions tend to be less frequently bid on, a coveted position, I should say. And so therefore, a lot of times they go unbid, and we force someone, the lowest seniority, that has the credentials to do that job into those positions. Medic 1's a fine example. 2 of the positions open for bid, nobody bid them, are on Medic 1 because that's the busiest truck, so nobody bid them. They force the lowest guy into those positions, and then every September they rebid them. So I guess that's one of the questions, is why are we handling this position differently? We have a thing in place to take care of bidding positions that aren't filled. Same thing with citywide. I spoke to AFSCME's president today, how they handle when they have a job vacancy. And she informed me just recently they had one in the sewer treatment plant. And I've seen them several times throughout my career. They post them. Nobody wants to transfer to that area. They open it citywide. Nobody bids it. They post however the city does to hire. They hire somebody, and they become a sewer treatment plant, and they're part of AFSCME. They don't say, well, nobody bid it, so let's hire a part-timer. I don't understand why we're doing it with these positions. We did have some myself had some informal talks with the fire chief with strategies that we could get the buildings inspected. Because we do believe this is an important safety service that needs to be provided. But it appears that the administration's only priority is to get a part-timer in there. And that's our problem. Why is the fire department the target of the part-time attack? We have other full-time inspectors. We have a full-time zoning inspector in the city. We have full-time property maintenance inspectors. But we choose to go part-time with a safety-sensitive position, such as a fire inspector, that has always been held by a full-time position. We just recently created the property maintenance inspectors, but they're full-time. I say recently, I'm not sure how long ago, but the fire inspectors have definitely been in place longer. I strongly believe this is an attack on full-time union employees by the administration, and it's nothing short of union busting. There have been many false statements made about our firefighters and their commitment to the service to this city. I stand here proudly representing a group of people who give their life for this community. I believe the majority of our community supports their safety services and quite frankly are fed up with the continued attacks on our dedicated city workers. I ask that you vote against this unfair attack on the essential safety service to the citizens of Newark and keep this important full-time work within the bargaining unit. Follow the law. Let this be negotiated as it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? We'll go to ordinances on the second reading. 15-22.
Ordinance 15-22 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Rath, and ordinance amending the position authorization tables of the City of Newark Division of Fire by creating the position of part-time life safety inspector.
You've heard the second reading of 15-22. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mrs. Floyd?
I make a motion to adopt 15-22.
Second. Motion by Mrs. Floyd, second by Mr. Bubb. Is there any discussion on 15-22?
Mr. President.
Mrs. Floyd?
We need to amend 15-22. You actually have in your packet the amended version. It turns out in section 3, about the 4th line down in the paragraph, it has the term part-time life safety inspectors, and it had included in there and firefighters. The amended version you have does not have that term, but we need to, by motion, take this out. So I make a motion to amend it as it is shown in the piece of paper you have before you.
Second. Motion to amend by Mrs. Floyd, second by Mr. Bubb. So we're just taking out the words that were in there, part-time firefighter.
Mr. Willett, second.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Roletta. I sure got from down at that end. I'm sorry. Mr. Roletta was a second on that. Is there any other discussion on 15-22? Seeing none, let's vote on the amendment. Autumn, please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bubb?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie? Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
And Mr. Roletta?
Yes. 15-22, the amendment passes 9-0. Now, is there any discussion on 15-22 as amended? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Blake?
No.
Mr. Bubb?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie? Ms. Hall?
No.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
And Mr. Roletta?
No. 15-22 by my count passes 6-3 as amended. Next we have 15-24.
Ordinance 15-24 by Mr. Cost, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath, an ordinance vacating a portion of a 16.5-foot wide alley as shown on the plat of the John R. Hughes edition as recorded in Plat Book 3, page 13 of the Licking County Plat Records located between properties at 279 and 295 Wilson Street.
You've heard the second reading of 15-24. What is your wish?
Make a motion.
Mr. Johnson makes a motion.
Second.
Second by Mr. Marmee. Is there any discussion on 15-24? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bubb?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie? Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
15-24 passes 9-0. Next, we have ordinances on the first reading, 15-25.
Ordinance 15-25 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Rath, an ordinance amending Chapter 890 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Newark, Ohio regarding the levying and collection of municipal income taxes.
15-25 will be held for a second reading. Now we'll move on to resolutions on the second reading.
Resolution 1571 by Mr. Blake, Mr. Cost, Mr. Marmee, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Rath, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
You've heard the second reading of 15-71. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Blake?
move to adopt 1571.
Motion by Mr. Blake. Second by Mr. Cost. Is there any discussion on 15-71? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie? Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rapp?
Yes.
And Mr. Roletta?
Yes. 15-71 passes 9-0. Next, we have 15-72.
Resolution 15-72 by Mr. Cost, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Marmee, and Mr. Rapp. This is a resolution to for construction of sidewalks and related work on Arlington Avenue from State Route 79 North to Heritage Middle School within the city of Newark.
You've heard the second reading of 15-72. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Cost.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 15-72.
Motion by Mr. Cost.
Second.
Second by Mr. Johnson. Is there any discussion on 15-72? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie? Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rapp?
Yes.
And Mr. Roletta?
Yes. 15-72 passes 9-0. Still on the second reading, we have 15-74.
Resolution 15-74 by Mr. Cost, Mr. Marmee, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Rapp, a resolution of intent to vacate a portion of a 16.5-foot wide alley running north from West Main Street between properties at 108 and 112 West Main Street.
You've heard the second reading of 15-74. What is your wish?
Motion.
Mr. Johnson makes a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Marmee. Is there any discussion on 15-74? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie? Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rapp?
Yes.
And Mr. Roletta?
Yes. 15-74 passes 9-0. Next, we have 15-75.
Resolution 15-75 by Mr. Cost, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rapp, a resolution of intent to vacate a portion of a 12-foot wide alley as shown on the plat of the John Kuhn's addition as recorded in Plat Book 2 at page 246 of the Licking County Plat Records located between properties at 301 and 303 Clinton Street.
You've heard the second reading of 15-75. What is your wish?
Make a motion.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Johnson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Marmee. Is there any discussion on 15-75? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie? Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rapp?
Yes.
And Mr. Roletta?
Yes. 15-75 passes 9-0. Now we move on to resolutions on the first reading. 15-76.
Resolution 15-76 by Mr. Cost, Mr. Marmee, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Rapp, a resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service and the Director of Public Safety enter into contract with the Licking County Board of Commissioners and Licking County Emergency Management Agency for the provision of the Emergency 911 Communications Services on behalf of the City of Newark Division of Police.
15-76 will be held for a second reading on the 21st. Next we have 15-77.
Resolution 15-77 by Mr. Cost, Mr. Marmee, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Rapp, a resolution appropriating and disappropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
You've heard the first, Mr. Blake.
Mr. President, move to waive the 2-day reading rule.
Second.
Mr. Blake moves to waive the 2-day reading rule. Mrs. Floyd seconds. Mr. Blake.
There's some deadlines related to these appropriations with the TIFs, and there's also some employee payouts.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Autumn, please call the roll and waive the 2-day reading rule.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie? Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rapp?
Yes.
And Mr. Roletta?
Yes. 2-day reading rule has been waived. Mr. Blake.
I move to adopt 1577.
Motion by Mr. Blake, second by Mrs. Floyd. Is there any other discussion on 15-77? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie? Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
And Mr. Roletta?
Yes. 15-77 passes 9-0. Next on the first reading, we have 15-78.
Resolution 15-78 by Mr. Cost, Mr. Marmee, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Rath, a resolution appropriating and disappropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
15-78 will be held for second reading. Next, we have 15-79.
Resolution 15-79 by Mr. Marmee, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
15-79 will be held for second reading. Next, we have 15-80.
Resolution 15-80 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath, Mrs. Floyd, a resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor.
15-80 will be held for second reading. Next, we have 15-81.
Resolution 15-81 by Mr. Rath. This is a resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service to prepare and submit applications to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvements Program and to execute contracts as required.
15-81 will be held for second reading. Finally, tonight, we have 15-82.
Resolution 15-82 by Mr. Cost, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Rath. This is a resolution to create a multi-use trail along the South Fork Licking River that will run between the Ohio State Bridge over the North Fork Licking River and South 2nd Street. In addition, there will be an on-street bike route on South 2nd Street between Ohio Street and Walnut Street within the city of Newark.
15-82 will be held for second reading.
President, point of order, you might note on the last part of 1582, while it doesn't follow our standard format, it follows a format authorized by the Department of Transportation. It does contain the emergency clause.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end of that.
Contains the emergency clause.
Thank you, Mr. Sassen.
Make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Marmee. Since this is an emergency clause, we just have one reading. Mr. Marmee's made a motion to adopt. Second by Mr. Rath. Do we have any? Thank you, Mr. Sassen. Do we have any other discussion on 15-82? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie? Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
And Mr. Roletta?
Yes. 15-82 passes 9-0. And that concludes our legislation this evening. Next on the agenda, we have our second opportunity for comments from citizens. Do we have anyone that would like to comment? Mr. Crawford?
Daniel Crawford, 163 South 2nd Street. We have a lot to look forward to in the coming years. After a few frustrating months of not being able to use part of South 2nd Street, one has to admit that the work done so far was worth the wait. It is clear from what we've seen so far that the downtown area is about to look incredibly beautiful. With that in mind, I have to reiterate my plea that we remember to look beyond this worthwhile project on the square. Each corner of Newark ought to be included in this beautification and revitalization, especially the poorest sections. To some, it may seem like a waste of taxpayer dollars to invest in making our city look better or devoting funds for recreational purposes like restoring the public pool and our numerous parks. Truth is, a community that wants to grow while attracting new jobs and making itself an appealing place to call home must consider the quality of life as a factor in their vision moving forward. Businesses want to set up shop where they see optimism as portrayed by a locale's appearance and how the citizens thereof interact with one another. Likewise, people tend to prefer an atmosphere conducive for friendly, safe socialization. How about reaching out to the citizens living in the downtrodden neighborhoods of Newark? For instance, what would the inhabitants of the East End like to see? Are they satisfied with only having Everett's Park and the basketball court? Surely there is more that we can do to strengthen the sense of community between the bridge and the basket. As a proud South Ender, I have to say that I enjoy having the baseball park nearby, as well as mound builders on the border with Heath. Even so, I would like to see more done to enhance the quality of life for us as well. Earlier this year, I spoke with an older gentleman who reminisced about a time when boxcar racing was a regular tradition on South 2nd Street. Yet another fellow citizen, closer to my age, recently expressed to me his desire to see a youth center in the area. The point of their valuable input is that we can do more to reinvigorate Newark's vibrant community spirit. Our city's disadvantage should have a slice of the progress pie. When looking forward, it would be best that we not look past the men, women, and children who work hard in unstable jobs, who struggle to pay for their basic needs, not to mention enjoying the finer things in life like a decent birthday or holiday celebration, who deal with the daily fear of having utilities shut off or getting evicted, and who've had to endure the elements as a victim of homelessness. These people, like the prized middle class, need us to care about and listen to them. Involving the weakest in our growth will make us all stronger in the end. Building a better, more beautiful, and more hopeful future for our city involves more than making adjustments to the external appearance of the city's physical heart. While making these improvements serves an important role in moving us forward, the act of beautifying a community on the outside is meaningless if we do nothing to connect our vision with the city's spirit as found in how each individual citizen perceives their role. Let us pursue a course where we actively seek to infect every corner of the city with the optimism we feel in this room. The people, particularly those who are quite used to being overlooked, deserve to be partners in this revitalization campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Anyone else? Mr. Moran?
Paul Moran, 63 North 4th Street. I have 4 items I want to address tonight. September 6th, 1955, Benjamin Franklin School opened up 60 years ago. And we've only got 4 of the old long-time schools yet left in the city, and that's one of them. It housed grades 1 through 9 during that time, which had been quite an experience for everybody on that. So I want to congratulate the school and the staff and everybody on their anniversary this school year. Second, I wrote a couple letters and sent a picture to the Genesee and Wyoming Railroad about a problem at the downtown railroad crossing, which was not on their list or mentioned in the Advocate article. I wrote to the president, and I also wrote to the guy over the maintenance and sent a picture. And they did address the problem. They've taken care of it, which I was surprised. And this shows, good old fashioned letter writing can still have good positive effects on people in getting things accomplished. But yeah, the wooden railroad tie was completely rotted out in pieces. Pedestrians really couldn't use it with the food pantry and the thrift store and all that right next to it. You had to go out into East Main Street because the wood was all rotted in pieces. But yeah, they've put pavement down there and a couple other sections, so now you can go across it a lot better. So I'm glad that the railroad company responded to my concerns. Thank you. Also on a railroad-related matter, just recently, during the downtown dig, they dug up a section of interurban rail, and it's laying on the sidewalk on the south side of the square if anybody wants to go over and look at it, or if they haven't seen it yet. It's a big, long piece, kind of bend in it. And there's also a little piece of wooden tie they got sitting on top of it that they dug up out of the ground. I wish the Advocate would cover this kind of stuff, but I guess they want me to do it. So, I'm sharing it with everybody because there's a lot of historians in Newark, and I'm sure they would be interested in this kind of stuff. But, Gannett out of Columbus and wherever, it's more important what's going on in Franklin County and Western Lincoln County than what is going on here in Newark. So, I wanted to bring that up. I also want to address the youth on the square matter. There have been problems, we know that. But taking away their bicycles is not the solution to the problems. If we're going to do that, we might as well take away their foot scooters, their skateboards, and sneakers with built-in rollers. This ordinance, it needs to be repealed. I feel that it's out of date. It's not in with our modern times. Eventually, we're going to see skateboards with little motors on them or something in time. So I feel that this bicycle ordinance needs to be removed. And if we're going to do anything, we know they're all juveniles. I mean, why don't the law go in and take away their cigarettes and not their bicycles? I mean, it makes more common sense to do that from a health standard so that they live longer and productive lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. Anyone else? Mr. Frazier, that 15-25 you talked about, I believe, was on the first reading, so it would be held for 2 weeks, so hopefully you'll get an answer on that one. Anyone from the administration this evening? Auditor, Mr. Johnson. Pass. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Honorable Law Director Sassen.
Thank you, Mr. President. With regard to 1525, that ordinance is actually mandated by House Bill 5, which was passed in the last year by the General Assembly. The pending Senate Bill 186, its success or failure will have no impact on the applicability of 1525.
You got your answer quicker than 2 weeks. Thank you, Mr. Sassen.
And I pass.
Thank you, Mr. Sassen. Mayor Hall.
Just a good weekend at Wakefield with the new turf, and if everybody understands, not even $1 of school dollars were used for that, so it was private sector step forward. While Newark High played hard on Friday night, could not quite work it out, but Newark Catholic had a great overtime 1-point win on Saturday to christen that field as the first winner on the field. So it was all good, and I thought the stands were full, pretty full both nights, and good weekend. With that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll call for Finance Committee meeting for next Monday. And then just want to thank the mayor. We're starting our second year for the Newark Youth Council. Last week we had a meeting with the various school advisors. And so we'll have another good group of 14 young leaders from our community starting to meet on the 17th. They'll be meeting again on the third Thursday of each month. And this year, the mayor and I will work out a little more structure for the group and have some more educational opportunities to go see some various different city locations for this group of teenagers. But just looking forward to the second year of the Newark Youth Council. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Mr. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one item this evening. I just wanted to compliment Jeff Hotchkiss and Dave Rhodes on their work with the East Main basketball courts, and they were able to obtain a few grants, I believe, from the Licking County Foundation, the Board of Realtors, and it's really starting to look nice down there. And Jeff did a real nice job on that, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mr. Cost. Pass. Mr. Cost. Mrs. Floyd.
Several things. I think some of you may be aware of this. I'll give it to the mayor, maybe you can have it put on the bulletin board out there, but Good Guys Garage, which is just around the corner here, is sponsoring a man by the name of John Formica, who's an ex-Disney guy, who's coming to Newark at the Midland Theater on Tuesday, September 29th. There's a networking and coffee at 8, and then a seminar from 9 to 11, and he's going to basically tell people how to turn their businesses into a very successful business. He's all pumped up about it, but anyhow, they're trying to get a lot of people there. I know some businesses have already been approached to come. This Friday starts the beginning of the United Way Week of Caring, where they do projects all over Licking County, painting things, cleaning up things, various groups. There's a luncheon on Friday where people get their t-shirts and things sort of get started, and then there are projects all next week. And then on the 20th is the JC's Parade, where, which is considered sort of the wrap-up of the Week of Caring. Whitesfield looks great. For those of you who haven't been by, you ought to go by. But I understand there was also a Newark soccer win on that field. I don't know, Saturday afternoon maybe? I don't know. Somebody at church told me that, so just so you're aware. A reminder that the Midland, the fall season is starting. They have a number of shows already listed. I would encourage people to try to go to shows at the Midland. We sort of have a gem there. I volunteer there, and every time there's somebody who has never been in the Midland, and can we go up to the balcony to see what the theater looks like? And and I mean, people come from all over. I've mentioned that before, but they come from many states away, depending on the band, or the group that is there. But we have sort of a gem in Newark, and I would encourage everybody to try to attend those things that you're interested in. And finally, I would like to thank the various labor groups who sponsored the Labor Day Parade yesterday. It was very nice. It's always kind of short, and but there was a nice crowd, and the people at the GMP provided a very nice meal for approximately 400 people afterwards. So I would like to thank them. And with that, I pass.
Thank you, Mrs. Floyd. Ms. Hall?
I'd like to call a capital improvement meeting. With that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Johnson?
I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Marmee?
Yes. The first thing I'd like to mention is to Mr. Moran, there's already many laws in place as far as tobacco products and juveniles that they can be taken away. And then the official victory was John Quackenbush's soccer team at noon.
Okay.
And the temperature on the field at noon Saturday was over 100 degrees. And they definitely made it past that heat and pulled out a victory. And it was just a beautiful weekend for Whitefield. And as far as the 3 different games that I was able to see, first of all, the Newark High football game, then the soccer game, and then Newark Catholic. And I think, in a week and a half, on the 18th and 19th, there's back-to-back games again. So it'll be an exciting time. If you have not been down to Whitefield, it is just incredible. And the pride for the kids that are participating on that field, it is just unbelievable for them. And you can just definitely tell it's kind of picked them up a notch. Although Newark High was not victorious on Friday night, their kids were pumped. You could just tell. And not only that, I even heard some of the students say, you know what, that's more points on that scoreboard for a Newark High game than we've seen in a long time. So they were, even though they did not come out victorious, they were very proud that they're making improvements and they're moving in the right direction. So with that, I pass.
Thank you, Mr. Marmee. Mr. Rapp?
Thank you. I was also at the Labor Day Parade on yesterday, and it was a short parade, but it was very well attended. I also went down to the GMP for the meal. That was real nice of them to do that. There was a lot of people there. Wanted to call an Economic Development Committee meeting, and with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Rapp. Mr. Roy?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sad to say we recently lost a great member of our community, Jerry Satterfield. He's a lifelong Newark resident, very involved with things here locally. He wrote the local history columns in The Advocate, and he's a great person and he'll be missed. That'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Rudd. Just a couple odds and ends. Our next committee meeting will be next Monday, this coming Monday, the 14th at 5:30 here in this room. Next council meeting will be in a little less than 2 weeks, Monday the 21st at 7 o'clock, also here in council chambers. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. We always appreciate your coming and your input. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Rath, second by Mr. Koff. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Thank you.